Honkai Star Rail is a game that I've been captivated by ever since it came out, but it should really be acknowledged that so much of what makes the game good resulted from many carefully thought out early decisions. A lot of things were changed so long ago that you might not remember them, or may not have even been playing the game before they happened. So here's a list of 7 major things that were changed or outright removed from Star Rail early on. Some of these are actually fairly obscure, so watch until the end. Number 1. We're going to be talking a lot about Star Rail's closed beta tests, which were ran on October of 2021, May of 2022, and February of 2023, before the game fully launched in April of 2023. You might be thinking it's obvious that a lot is going to change across 3 years of development, and while that's true, there's also many times where things initially don't necessarily need adjustments. One such example is that for relics, the planar sphere and link rope pieces used to not exist at all. There were always 6 different relic slots per character though, so the ones that were replaced were called neck pieces and articles. Rather than belonging to their own 2-piece sets, these relics were a part of the existing original relic sets that are still currently in the game. They even had a set piece bonus beyond the current 4 pieces, not quite 6 but a 5-piece set bonus. I wish I could say they had unique and game-changing passives, but the reality was that they simply doubled the same effect that having a 2-piece set would grant. This implementation had some merit though, since it meant you could run a set of 5 and have room for 1 offset piece, in addition to the option of using a combination of 4 and 2. This would allow players to make full use of a single relic, even if it wasn't of the correct set. However, this was long before self-modeling resins were a thing, so we took 1 step forward and 1 step back, I suppose. But while the effects on farming can be debated, the actual abilities of the replacement relics are definitely way more interestingly designed, even if playing around the stat floors can be annoying sometimes. Thematically, they are also really cool for foreshadowing different areas in the game's universe. The distributions of main stats were also changed, as you can see here. The biggest thing is the removal of a defense main stat locked relic, which was definitely for the better since it allows characters to put more into their other preferred stats. So I tried to find the art for all of the lost relics, and it was pretty difficult because very few players found relics after spending 10 plus hours to complete the campaign, knowing that their accounts would be reset. However, after like an hour of sifting through various playthroughs, I think I compiled all of them. You should be able to guess which belongs to each set just by looking at them. Number 2. Simulated universe itself also used to be completely different. Rather than being split into many shorter segments called domains, there were much bigger floors that you would run around and explore. If you collected abandoned code and brought it to an interpreter station to run it, you could get rewards, sometimes with elements of randomness thrown in. If the abandoned code looks familiar to you, it's because these art assets were later repurposed into some of the negative effect curios. Some of the past curios used to focus on the roguelike gameplay loop of having previous runs be able to directly contribute to future ones, but this was scrapped in favor of a different type of roguelike progression, being the ability tree that you upgrade over time. You could also run into NPCs of playable characters, and they would have a few different offerings for you, which were phased out for occurrence events that focus more on general world building. It probably shouldn't come as a surprise that early on, the way blessings and paths worked wasn't always as fleshed out as it is now, but in the beginning you didn't even get to choose the path you wanted. It would change and be set on a rotation based on the real life date you were playing. Path resonance used to be called Aeon Intervention, because rather than building up charge and being able to manually activate it, it would simply activate on its own every turn. Upgrading this ability was also different, as instead of it coming from collecting blessings from the corresponding path, your intervention level would just go up from defeating more enemies. There also used to be 2 different modes within Simulated Universe. Exploration mode is what I've been talking about up to now, and challenge mode would have you pick from the lineups of completed past exploration runs, including blessings, and you take that team straight into a final boss fight that would give you a score with optional bonus objectives. Challenge score would be accumulated to get extra Hertobons. It's pretty neat that the concept of saving completed runs and using them against bosses was repurposed in the more recently released Diverging Universes ornament farming system, 3 years later. Number 3. Rewards were structured completely differently for Simulated Universe in the past as well. As mentioned, planar ornaments were not yet in the game, so the primary reward for your individual runs was a currency called collector coins. These are nowhere to be found in the current game, for good reason. You did not exchange this currency for items directly like Hertobons, but rather you'd pull from a gacha machine to get randomized rewards. The best reward was just enemy drops, so it wasn't anything that important. I just think it's quite comical that you could roll and very literally get trash. Perhaps they planned on putting some other reward in here before it got scrapped. In the current version of Simulated Universe, you get the same rewards but just through playing, so you no longer get to choose, but alternate methods of farming those monster drops have since been implemented anyway. There was also one other very significant change to rewards for this mode, this time regarding the weekly resets. Instead of having the most desirable rewards given by accumulating your weekly point total, weekly rewards used to be tied to challenges. And not only did some of these challenges look really annoying to complete, but their unlocks were staggered, meaning you wouldn't be able to do all of them at the same time unless it was towards the end of the week. Ignoring the unnecessary time gates, the purpose of challenges like these is to encourage players to try out different styles of play instead of always running the same strategy. However, giving out free Js for completing your index is a much better way of achieving the same goal, since it gives players incentives to see everything the mode has to offer while retaining full freedom of choice after they complete it. Number 4. Star Rail encourages you to explore its not too complicated overworld through chests, puzzles, and trotters that give you stellar jades, but it's not a huge deal if you ignore them for later. Well, in the first 2 closed betas, they really put a large emphasis on exploration as a whole. By going around and completing everything, you would accumulate exploration levels. They also gave jades so it doesn't seem too different, but some pretty crazy rewards were gated behind the higher ones, such as light cones and even the eidolons for the Trailblazer. We know now that this was overhauled, mainly visually, into shops and progression systems that are more in line with the theme of each planet. The Star Rail team seemed really into leveling systems back then though, because they had another one for achievements. As you'd expect, each achievement gave you a certain amount of points towards your level. Unfortunately, I could not find what kind of rewards they had, but I can't imagine they were anything that special. Number 5. Damage types are pretty important to make use of in combat, but besides determining the order of characters on the selection screen, they don't mean much of anything outside of combat. However, previously in the beta, just like its big brother Genshin Impact, the character type determined the color of the background on the character menu, and there were even puzzles for you to complete by attacking color matching objects. As you'd imagine, changing characters on your team just to complete overworld puzzles was quite annoying, so I'm glad they decided to go with normal puzzles. Number 6. Our lovable main characters had a few necessary adjustments early on. For one, March 7th's English voice direction was completely different, going for a much higher pitch than the current iteration.
Yeah, we'd never team up with someone like him. Yeah, we'd never team up with someone like him. I'm not trying to create trouble, but we're not friends with that scoundrel. Did you see how fast he ditched us? Yeah, we'd never team up with someone like him.
The Trailblazer had animation changes in both of their initial paths. The ultimate caused a transformation into an enhanced state rather than advancing the attack itself, which led to this extremely silly pose waiting for your input. The iconic line of "rules are made to be broken" wasn't always the only ultimate voice line, as he would initially say,
"The best defense is a good offense,"
upon pressing the ultimate button. For Preservation Trailblazer, their ultimate showed them running at the enemy rather than leaping, which also looks quite goofy. The posing and camera angles all around are very different, but scraping the lance across the ground definitely adds to the coolness factor. Number 7. Belobog's story used to be significantly darker in tone during the first closed beta before it was rewritten. The Herta Space Station intro section wasn't yet implemented at that point, so the story starts right when the Trailblazer boards the Astral Express. We stop at Urillo, find Sampo in the snow, fight Gepard, and when Gepard explains the history of Belobog is where we get our first divergence. In the final story, it's explained that the Antimatter Legion set everything on fire when the Eternal Freeze came without them knowing why. Belobog survived thanks to the Architects under the protection of Kleepot the Preservation. In the beta, the fire was kind of just there to begin with, and Gepard says the smoke caused the devils beneath the surface to summon the Eternal Freeze. But Belobog remains warm because it was blessed by Plamia. Plamia seems to have been written out since, but according to an official article released around the time of CBT1, they were the one that the people of Belobog worshipped. And yeah, when he says devils, he means the people who live in the underground. We will learn more about that soon. Instead of meeting with Cocolia, discussing the Stellaron, and getting to go around learning more about Belobog first, Bronya immediately jumps us, forcing us to run. Us getting caught, then being saved by Sampo is the same, but when Bronya is exposed to the underworld is where we really learn about what's going on. Unlike the final release, where the people of the Underworld's needs were neglected as they slaved away mining geomarrow because it was the only way to get supplies from the overworld, in the beta, Cocolia intentionally punished the devils by sealing them in the underground. And it gets even worse because geomarrow was basically radioactive, as the crystallization sickness it caused would destroy your body and then your consciousness, meaning they were really getting exploited like slaves. You might remember in Natasha's companion mission, you searched for the origin of a fake medicine that was supposed to fix up fatigued miners. Well, that was originally part of the Trailblaze quest, and the fake medicine instead temporarily staved off crystallization sickness before killing you. One such victim of the disease was Hook's father Firstman, who looked pretty bad. In fact, our first encounter with Hook in the beta is her doing a drug bust on the same guy we were trying to hunt down, as opposed to the hide and seek in the final build. We end up going to the mines to find Firstman after we get word that an incident happened, and he straight up dies. It's not shown on screen or anything, but it's not exactly subtle either. We find out before he dies that he was caught up in some kind of scheme with Svarog, who we now have to go find. On the way, we hear a rumor of a scavenger nicknamed the Bloody Rabbit, who ends up being Clara. She had already been mentioned earlier as having a pre-established friendship with Hook, as she was a part of the orphanage/daycare that Natasha takes care of. Rather than being found and raised by Svarog, it was more like she snuck out and formed a secret friendship with him. She also has a very noticeable dark marking on her neck that is absent from her current design, possibly alluding to something more tragic in her backstory. So we leverage Claire's relationship with Svarog to meet him just like in the current story, but in the beta the whole gang pulls up like they're the Avengers. I actually think it's suggested that we kill or get really close to killing him, because after the fight with him, rather than telling us his data about the Stellaron, we kind of just walk in and take it without him being there. From here on out, there's not that many changes, as the ending to the story was still in the works at this point. We don't see any of the Preservation Trailblazer yet or Cocolia's final form, just her regular boss fight. I can only assume they wanted to tone it down to make the Overworlders seem less like terrible people, or because this was the first main quest of the game and they didn't want to start off on such a dark tone. And that just about ends the list. Let me know if you remember anything that I missed, subscribe for more informational Star Rail videos, and as always, thanks for watching.